There's a quiet disappointment that a lot of people carry without ever naming it. You did the things. You got some version of what you were chasing, the job or the relationship or the apartment or the milestone. And for a little while it felt like arriving, and then faster than you expected the feeling drained out, and you found yourself standing in the life you'd worked for, wondering why it felt so much like the one you had before. Not unhappy exactly, just quietly puzzled. Because you'd been told in 1,000 small ways your whole life that happiness was waiting on the other side of the next achievement, and you got there and it wasn't. I want to talk tonight about happiness, but not the kind that phrase usually points at. Not the bright, temporary spike that comes from getting something you wanted, the kind that always fades and leaves you reaching for the next thing. I mean something steadier and stranger and honestly harder to come by, and that's a kind of contentment that doesn't depend so completely on your circumstances cooperating. Buddhism has been thinking carefully about this exact problem for a very long time, longer than almost any other tradition, and it arrived at some conclusions that run directly against most of what we're taught. There are 9 of them I want to walk through tonight. Slowly, because these aren't slogans to collect. They're a genuinely different way of understanding where a durable happiness actually comes from. Let me be honest first, so you don't mishear the whole thing. None of these teachings will make you happy in the way an advertisement promises. They won't hand you a permanent glow. If anything, they start by taking something away, which is the comforting belief that the right circumstances will finally fix everything. What they offer in its place is quieter and more durable, a happiness that doesn't collapse the moment life stops cooperating, which it always eventually does. That's a smaller promise than the one you've been sold. It's also, as far as I can tell, one of the only ones that turns out to be true. Let's begin with the first, because everything else rests on it. The first teaching is that chasing pleasure and avoiding pain is not the same as being happy. And confusing the two is why so many people feel empty even when things are going well. We're built to move toward what feels good and away from what feels bad, and there's nothing wrong with that in itself. But somewhere along the way, we mistook that reflex for a strategy for life. We started believing that if we could just stack up enough pleasant experiences and eliminate enough unpleasant ones, happiness would be the sum. And it doesn't work. Because pleasure is designed to fade. It has to. A pleasure that never faded would stop being a pleasure. So the whole project becomes a treadmill, each good feeling wearing off and sending you after the next, and you can run on that treadmill your entire life and never actually arrive anywhere. The first shift, the one that makes all the others possible, is realizing that the happiness worth wanting isn't a pile of good feelings at all. It's something more like a settled quality of mind that can hold both the good feelings and the bad ones without being ruled by either. But if happiness isn't the accumulation of pleasures, a fair question is, what keeps us so relentlessly chasing them anyway? Why can't we just stop? That question leads straight into the second teaching, and it names the engine underneath the whole exhausting cycle. The second teaching is that most of our suffering comes not from what we have or don't have, but from craving, the restless wanting itself. Notice the distinction, because it's easy to miss and it's everything. It isn't the lack of the thing that makes you suffer. It's the wanting of the thing, the grasping, the sense that you cannot be okay until you have it. 2 people can be in the exact same situation, missing the exact same thing, and one is at peace while the other is in agony. And the difference is entirely in how tightly each is clutching. Craving is a particular flavor of wanting, the kind that says, I need this in order to be all right. The kind that turns a preference into a demand, and it's insatiable by nature. The moment one craving is satisfied, the mind almost immediately produces another, because craving isn't really about any particular object. It's a habit, a mode the mind runs in. This is why getting what you want brings only that brief flicker before the wanting resumes. You didn't end the craving, you just fed it, and a fed craving comes back hungrier, Now, this is where people often hear something bleak, as though Buddhism is telling them to stop wanting anything, to go numb, to want nothing and feel nothing. So the third teaching exists to correct exactly that misunderstanding, and it's an important one. The third teaching is that letting go of craving does not mean not caring. This is the single most common misreading of the whole tradition, and it stops people at the door. They hear non-attachment and picture a cold, detached person who has stopped loving, stopped hoping, stopped engaging with life, and they quite reasonably want no part of it. But that's not it at all. The opposite of craving is an indifference. It's a kind of open-handed caring. You can love someone deeply without clutching them so hard that you're destroyed if they change or leave. You can pursue a goal wholeheartedly without your entire sense of okayness riding on whether it works out. The difference between craving and healthy desire is the clutch. Craving grips, demands, and cannot accept a no. Healthy desire reaches toward things fully and still remains standing if the thing doesn't come. Letting go isn't caring less. It's caring without the desperation, loving without the terror of loss braided through it. And paradoxically, that open-handed love is usually warmer and steadier than the grasping kind, because it isn't secretly poisoned by fear. And this points at something underneath all three of these, a deeper fact about reality that Buddhism keeps returning to, because once you really see it, the grasping starts to loosen on its own. That's the fourth teaching. The fourth teaching is that everything changes, and fighting that fact is a losing war that quietly runs underneath most of our unhappiness. Impermanence. Nothing you have will stay, nothing you feel will last, and the good moments pass, and so do the bad ones, and so will you. On the surface, this sounds like the most depressing idea imaginable, and if you only half absorb it, it is. But taken all the way in, it turns into something else entirely. Because half of our suffering comes from the quiet, unexamined expectation that things should hold still, that the good should stay and the arrangement we like should last. When it doesn't, we feel not just loss, but betrayal, as though reality broke a promise. Impermanence dissolves the sense of betrayal by dissolving the false promise. Nothing was ever going to stay. And once you stop expecting permanence, you can meet change as what it simply is. The basic texture of being alive rather than as a personal wound. There's an unexpected gift folded into this too. If nothing lasts, then the good things become precious precisely because they're passing. The sunset matters because it's ending. Impermanence isn't only what takes things away, it's also what makes them worth savoring while they're here. So, the first four teachings clear the ground. They show us what happiness isn't, what drives the chase, what letting go really means, and why grasping was always futile against a world in constant motion. The next teachings turn from clearing the ground to actually building something on it, and the fifth one is where that construction begins in the most ordinary place imaginable. The fifth teaching is that happiness lives in the present moment, or it lives nowhere, because the present is the only place you have ever actually been. Think about where your mind spends its time. Rehearsing the past, replaying conversations, revising old mistakes, or rehearsing the future, planning, worrying, imagining outcomes that haven't come. Almost none of it is spent here, in the actual moment you're living. And this matters enormously for happiness, because the past and the future are both, in a literal sense, not real. They exist only as thoughts. The only place life is ever actually happening is now, in this breath, in this room. When we're unhappy, a huge portion of that unhappiness turns out to be time travel, the mind visiting a painful memory or a feared future and suffering as though it were happening now. Presence isn't a mystical state. It's just the simple, difficult practice of bringing your attention back to what is actually here, again and again, because what's actually here right now is almost always more manageable than the mind's tour of everywhere else. Most people right now in this present moment are fundamentally okay. It's only in imagined time that things fall apart, and staying present naturally opens into the sixth teaching. Because once you're actually here, you start to notice how much of what you have was invisible to you while you were chasing what you didn't. The sixth teaching is that gratitude is not a nice add-on to happiness, but a large part of the thing itself, because the same mind that craves what it lacks is blind to what it holds. This isn't the forced, cheerful gratitude of writing 3 things you're thankful for while feeling nothing. It's something more fundamental, a genuine shift of attention. The craving mind is trained on absence, on the gap between where you are and where you want to be. And as long as your attention lives in that gap, you will feel poor no matter how much you have. Gratitude is simply the deliberate redirection of attention toward presence rather than absence, toward what is here rather than what is missing. And it's not a trick or a lie, because the good things genuinely are there. You'd grieve them terribly if they vanished. Gratitude is just noticing them before they vanish while you still have the chance. It turns out an enormous amount of ordinary unhappiness isn't caused by a lack of good things at all. It's caused by not seeing the good things that are already present, because the mind was too busy scanning for what wasn't. Now, these first 6 have been largely inward about how you hold your own mind. But happiness turns out not to be a purely private affair. And the 7th teaching turns outward, toward other people, and it may be the most reliably effective of all of them. The 7th teaching is that compassion and kindness toward others are among the most direct routes to your own happiness, which sounds almost too convenient to be true, until you notice how consistently it holds. There's something in our culture that frames happiness as a private acquisition, something you get for yourself and other people as at best a means to it. But this gets the mechanics almost exactly backward. The self-focused mind, endlessly monitoring its own state, asking, "Am I happy yet?" is a surprisingly miserable place to live, because the self is a small and anxious thing to be trapped inside. Turning toward others, genuinely wishing them well, acting for their benefit, does something the self-focused mind can never do for itself. It gets you out of the prison of your own concerns. When you're truly absorbed in caring for someone else, the anxious self quiets down, because it's no longer the center of attention. This is why kindness so often feels better to the giver than the receiver. It isn't a sacrifice of your happiness for theirs. It's one of the few things that reliably produces happiness in the doer. A life turned even slightly outward is almost always lighter than a life turned entirely in. And this connects to something deeper still, a shift in how you understand the very self that's been trying so hard to become happy. That's the 8th teaching. And it's the most philosophically radical of the 9. The 8th teaching is that much of your suffering comes from taking the self too seriously, from treating this me at the center of everything as a solid, permanent, all-important thing that must be defended and satisfied at all costs. This is subtle, so let me approach it gently. Notice how much of your unhappiness is really about the self, the wound to your pride, the comparison to someone doing better, the anxious guarding of your image, the replaying of the moment you looked foolish, the endless project of propping up and protecting this self. Buddhism makes a startling suggestion here, which is that this solid, separate self we're all so busy defending is more fluid and less fixed than it feels. You are not the same person you were 10 years ago, or even the same as this morning. The self is more like a river than a rock, a process, a flow, constantly changing. And when you loosen your grip on it even slightly, when you take it a little less seriously, an enormous weight lifts. So much of our suffering is the suffering of a self that feels perpetually under threat. Hold that self more lightly and the threats shrink. You don't have to win every argument, defend every slight, be right, be impressive, be more than the person beside you. The relief in that is hard to overstate. A great deal of what we call unhappiness is just the exhausting full-time job of being someone. Which brings us finally to the ninth, the one that gathers all the others and points them somewhere. Because it would be easy to hear these 8 as techniques for personal comfort, ways to feel a bit better. The ninth reframes the entire project. The ninth teaching is that lasting happiness comes not from getting life to serve you, but from living in a way that's aligned with how things actually are. This is the quiet culmination of everything else. Notice that all the previous teachings share a single shape. They all involve giving up the fight against reality and coming into agreement with it instead. Stop expecting pleasure to be permanent, because it isn't. Stop expecting things to stay, because they don't. Stop living in past and future, because they aren't real. Stop defending a fixed self, and because there isn't one. Every teaching is, at bottom, an invitation to stop struggling against the way things are and to live in accordance with them instead. And this is where the deepest happiness turns out to live. Not in bending the world to your preferences, which never fully works and exhausts you in the trying, but in the profound relief of stopping that war altogether. The unhappiest life is the one spent demanding that reality be other than it is. The happiest is the one that has made peace with reality's actual terms, impermanent, uncertain, unownable, and found that peace is not only possible on those terms, but is the only place peace was ever available. Happiness in the end isn't something you acquire. It's what remains when you stop fighting what is. Let me draw these together, because they were never 9 separate things but one continuous movement. You stop mistaking pleasure for happiness. You see that craving, not lack, is the engine of your suffering. You learn that letting go means caring without clutching, not caring. You accept that everything changes, which frees you from the betrayal of expecting permanence. You come home to the present, the only place life happens. You notice with gratitude what was there all along. You turn outward and find that kindness lightens the one who gives it. You hold the self more loosely and feel the weight of defending it lift. And finally, you stop fighting reality altogether and discover that peace was waiting there the whole time on the far side of the struggle. Each one loosens a different grip. Together, they describe not a set of tips, but a fundamentally different way of standing in your own life. Now, let me be honest with you, because I'd be doing you no favors otherwise. You will not remember these 9 teachings the next time you're genuinely unhappy. When the craving grips hard, or the loss lands, or the self feels wounded and desperate to defend itself, all of this will vanish and you'll just be a person struggling and the same as everyone. That's not failure. That's being human. None of this is a switch you flip once and stay enlightened. It's a slow reorientation that happens in small moments over years, in the ordinary frustrations more than the grand crises. The practice is that occasionally in the middle of the grasping you remember, oh, this is craving and it can't actually be satisfied, or, oh, this thing was never going to last and my pain is the pain of expecting it to. Even one of these arriving once in a hard moment changes that moment. And enough changed moments slowly, quietly change a life. So here's the one thing I'd ask you to try, and it's smaller than all 9. Just pick the single teaching that landed hardest. As you listened, the one your mind snagged on maybe resisted a little, because the resistance usually means it touched something true. Don't try to hold all 9. Just carry that one into tomorrow and watch for a single moment where it applies, and in that moment apply it once. That's all. One teaching, one moment, one time. Lasting change never comes from adopting 9 principles at once. It comes from one small shift actually made in one real moment, and then another, and until one day you notice you've become someone who stands differently in their own life. Think back to that quiet disappointment I described at the start. standing in the life you worked for and wondering why it felt so much like the one before. Here's what these teachings finally explain about that moment. The happiness you were reaching for was never going to be waiting at the end of the achievement because it was never a thing to be obtained at all. It's not out ahead of you, one more accomplishment away. It's underneath you, available now in a way of holding your own experience that doesn't depend on getting anything at all. You were looking in the one direction it could never be found, forward toward the next thing. It was here the whole time, in how you meet what's already in front of you. If you'd like, leave one word below for the single teaching you're carrying into tomorrow. Just the one. Sometimes naming the thing you're practicing is the first small act of practicing it. And when you're ready, there's a natural question waiting just past this one. Because understanding what happiness is turns out to be far easier than actually living it day after day. When old habits pull you back toward grasping and forgetting, how you build these insights into steady daily practice so they're there when you need them is its own quiet art. And that's exactly where we'll go next.